Cool. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Art of Creation show, where we look at how choice creates and different possibilities for creating a life and a living that can actually work for you. How does it get any better than that? So I'm your host, Rebecca Boswell, and today's topic is hell-bent on kindness. And how fun is that? And to have this conversation today, our special guest is Desiree DuMonde. So desire of the world. You maybe didn't even know that, that you desired her, and yet now you get to have this full episode with her. And how does it get any better than that? So Desiree is an artist of all different dimensions, as well as, in that repertoire of being an artist, a professional opera singer. So she does travel the world singing, going on tour next week, I think. Man, I would love to get in your suitcase and come with you. Yes, what would it take? A slightly bigger suitcase, maybe. And then also, you know, a voice coach and also a personal development coach, assisting people with shifting and changing things in their world and using their voice to also create more of the life and living that brings ease and joy and glory. So welcome today, Desiree. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. It is my joy to be here, and it's really like so much fun to have conversations that, you know, tap into what we're all capable of, and I'm just so grateful you've asked me to be on your show.
Yes, thank you. Well, and thank you for being here. And you know, one of the things when we were talking and this topic came up, one of the things that I really perceive in your world is actually this huge capacity for kindness, whatever that is, right? And then we started looking at kindness and the word and the energies that come up a lot when we are talking about kindness, when we are trying to be kind, figure out what's required in our lives with different people and in different situations in which we think, okay, well, you know, how can I be kind here? But sometimes we realize there's a little bit of a tweak and a little bit of some funky stuff that can happen when we are trying to be kind instead of actually coming from an energy of contribution or an energy of true kindness. Because you were even, you know, looking at how, you know, kindness includes ourselves too. And sometimes we forget that.
I think first and foremost, and it's just not how we're trained. It's not something that we're familiar with. There's so many bastardizations of kindness and confusions of how to please everyone and how to ensure that everyone else is comfortable and satisfied. And you may find yourself often worn thin, always putting yourself, or at least for me, for many years, I wasn't even on my list. And if I was on my list of who to be kind to, it was most definitely at the bottom, which I never could get to because I had the whole universe on my list.
Yeah, I'll get to it, but let me just do this first. Yeah. And then that time never comes. Yeah. So what is kindness? You know, we're talking about kindness. It's a word that we use, you know, if not daily, very often in everyday vocabulary for the most part, people. And yet we're just throwing this word around. So what is the invitation to maybe a different possibility with kindness? What is kindness? What can it be that maybe we haven't fully acknowledged yet?
Wow, I love that question. That's working on me right now. Well, I mean, again, it's really staying in the question of what is kindness, and it's constantly shifting, you know, throughout the day and throughout your life. I mean, that question shifts for me every 10 seconds or at least every hour. Yeah. And if I weren't in any kind of preconceived idea of what it looks like, when you and I were chatting the other day, I mentioned that it may sound bizarre, but one of the most kind hours spent of all these exciting, amazing adventures I've been on, one of the most kind hours spent was cleaning my garage in with no music, no phone, no accolades, no reward. Really not even getting it very clean. just allowing myself to have the kindness of space.
Yeah.
Just space for me. It wasn't about getting quiet. It wasn't about cutting myself off. It was really just, for me, that was like accumulating some space and occupying it with all of me. Yeah. And then, you know, maybe later in the afternoon, kindness looked like being 100%, 5,000% present with someone else and really listening. So it's that ever-changing, malleable question of asking, what is truly kind right now? What would be kind for me and what would be kind for the planet? And if you're with someone, I always like to remind myself, whomever I am with is where the most generous contribution is available to either be it for them or to open myself to receiving. Yeah. So no matter what situation I'm in, that's going to change.
Yeah. And I mean, that is a huge piece, right? Because how much do we learn, okay, kindness is blank. And then we're given all of these examples of like what kindness is. So then as soon as we come into a situation, it's like, we're like, oh, this is where now I should do this, or I should be this, or in order to be judged in a particular way, I have to now, you know, give myself in whatever way is required. And what you're saying is that every situation can be different. So it's about really knowing what is true for you in the moment and what is going to create greater with all the people involved, even if it doesn't fit the formula of A plus B equals C. It could be A plus 5 equals blue. And right, if that's actually going to create greater.
It's really kind of a fun thing about presence. So I used to confuse pleasantries with presence. And I do a fairly good job at tapping into people's reality and improving it, trying to be a good listener at the moment, or suggest something that I've recently read, or, oh, I know, I connect them to X, Y, or Z. And that isn't necessarily being present. And it definitely, most often for me, excludes me.
Yeah.
So kindness, I mean, I'm asking questions of like, what is kindness in the inclusion of me and in total presence, and with no judgment of how pleasant or nice that may look.
Yeah. And definitely there is this thing where kindness and being nice come together. And yeah, people can seemingly be very nice, and then you find out that they're actually not being very kind. And yeah, so, you know, what are you actually functioning from? And what if sometimes, you know, saying no is actually a kindness? I mean, I see that a lot, even you know, with having children. You know, sometimes there are places where, you know, me saying, that's not going to work for me, or not today, or not now, or not this time, doesn't mean no forever. But in this 10 seconds, that's actually not going to work. And so saying no is actually a kindness. What I found is lots of times, and this can be with friends or in a work situation, or any given situation of like, if someone is asking something of you or demanding something of you, and you say yes when it's actually a no, then what does it create? Yeah.
Usually an unkindness.
Yes. And so I know, like, for me, whenever I become Dragon Lady, okay, that's what the kids and I lovingly refer to as like the demon that comes out when I go past a point of allowance for what's occurring. You know, it's really, if I look at it, it's like, oh, okay, I can see where I actually gave myself up to do what I thought would be a good thing, you know, trying to be kind to them, make them happy, right? And yet I wasn't actually following what I was knowing, and I wasn't totally in allowance of what I was giving. So it's like, I'm going to give this, be this as kindness, but I wasn't truly in alignment with whatever that energy was. So then there was this thing of like, I did this for you, and now you should be this way, and you're not, and now I'm angry, or I'm, whatever. And it's like, wow, it could have been so much more ease, so much more space, if I had just said, that doesn't work, with allowance of me and allowance of them, and, chosen something different.
Well, it's so playful, because what that's really tapping into is also where we try to control pleasantries in this linear fashion, and I can only imagine raising kids, but when I'm teaching, I can catch myself in this way, or also as a musician. But when you're trying to be kind, when you're trying to do anything right, and kindness is usually about trying to get it right, and you have this linear approach, there is an absence. I mean, by the nature of trying, you are eliminating and disregarding your knowing, and to play with knowing as like, the playfulness and the chaos of letting things kind of roll in whatever way that creates the most. So it's funny because it may catch people off guard. And when you were talking, I was remembering many times over the years, this particular kind of thing has been said to me when I'm teaching. I have a lot of students who get accustomed to the chaos in here because we just follow each other's knowing, and anything can happen, and there's really no formula to how a lesson goes here. But sometimes I'll get a new student, or somebody who is so used to a linear approach to getting something right, and it's very hard to like, I've had many students where they just stop and they're like, they're laughing, they're caught off guard, they don't know how this could be an educational environment, they can't fathom that they're going to get better in this chaotic space, and they kind of want to control it and tone it down so I could like reprimand them, tell them what's good, what's right, what's wrong, be kind to them, be unkind to them, give them this thing. And it at least in my experience of almost 20 years of teaching, when I try that, there's not a lot of improvement, and they don't tend to want to come back. So what I'm trying to get at is that the chaos, the chaotic playfulness of like, what do I know right now? And if I were willing to just roll with what's kind for me, include me, and let this not be linear and controlled, the most unusual people who seem like they want a linear approach melt into that. They just melt into that, whether you ever explain it or not. And so I've never really returned to any kind of need to have a structure in an educational setting, or in any setting really, but about kindness. Like, this is a very chaotic, playful thing. It's not, it cannot be efforted.
It doesn't, and it rarely shows up the way we think it will. And when we try to muscle it into a particular form, we're actually negating what is real in that moment. And what I hear you saying really is, or pointing to here, is the vulnerability involved in truly being kind, where you're kind, you are being the energy of kindness, which means that, it's in and with and through you and anyone and everyone around you who's willing to receive it. And there's a vulnerability required there. Because if you're doing kindness as you've been taught, as a form and a structure and a formula, you're actually, you have a barrier and a shield that you've put up that doesn't actually invite any other possibility for you to be more in communion with yourself and everyone and everything around you. Sorry,
go ahead. Well, there's something there about, maybe it took me too long to get this, but at the same time, I always was thriving under in the environments of kindness that were often, so we're kind of dancing around this, where kindness doesn't look the way we think it does. So as an opera singer, it's a very rigid, highly critical environment where you're just literally consumed with criticism all the time. And there would be times where that was unkind. But there's also this addiction to the kindness of other beings rooting for something they know is great in you and cultivating greatness in you, even if it feels unkind at the moment. So there's this amazing thing that kindness is really where we're generating greatness.
Yeah.
No matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I would even add, no matter what it feels like. So you can ask questions. I mean, there's different environments, like, you know, is this actually unkind?
Yeah.
Or is this kindness that's showing up like dragon fire and demanding better greatness in me? Like, I can turn it up. And when there's niceties and flattery, I mean, at least in my experience, I tend to plateau or just withdraw because I don't really sense in there that this other being is like rooting for me, really.
Yeah.
And so a kindness, an exchange of kindness, for me, and I ask the universe for more amazing, generative, wonderful, creative, magnificent friendships. And they're showing up one after another. So kindness for me is an exchange of cultivating and coaxing greatness out of each other, whether that's one-on-one or, you know, reaching out to many people or however you do it. But it can look and feel unkind when it's most kind.
Yeah. And, you know, you were talking before about presence and it's like how much of this is actually where you are willing to be present with yourself, willing to be present with one another, and, you know, willing to have no point of view about, you know, like if you're trying to prove something, but, you know, with your kindness, or you're trying to get something with your kindness, or you're, you know, trying to hide something with your kindness, there's an agenda to it. And when we can be the space, right, that space of allowance, that space of like I choose kindness for me. I choose to be the energies of kindness. I choose to like be in the question of, you know, if, you know, is what I'm choosing now actually a kindness? Is it inviting greater? Is it a contribution? You know, how much is this really a conversation about, you know, am I contributing? Am I being a contribution? Am I contributing to myself? Am I contributing to the energy of the future that I'd like to create? Am I contributing to this other person? Or am I actually just checking a box? Or am I trying to, you know, receive something out of it? Or, you know, is there some outcome, right? Like, and lots of times those things can be very subtle. We don't even realize it. It could be the agenda of wanting to be liked, right? And you just assume cut off all your arms and your legs. But if you're liked, then it's working. But is it really?
Well, yeah, and you know, there's many of us out there who have, and we were seeking out to be liked, or occasionally find ourselves in that program of like, well, you know, like you're looking to be liked because of an awareness of real kindness.
Yeah.
And when you kind of look around at this reality, there's not a lot of examples of it. There's often manipulation. There's often things that make us kind of recoil, and then we feel lonely and isolated. So then we try to be liked as our best avenue to connect and to create and to co-create and to share. And we all have something so precious and boiling and ready and ripe to share. And you're going down the right alley. I mean, it's instead of making yourself wrong, if you've ever like been seeking out to be liked, you know, I really wanted my family and my friends and my teachers and my coaches and my conductors and I wanted everybody to be proud of me, because that was like old language from my parents' generation, and it was kind of also a confusion of words, where it really made my heart expand if people were proud of me.
Yeah.
So I was looking to earn their pride.
Yeah.
And that isn't really, you know, what ended up happening. Whenever I was just being me, and the kindness of me is when I was in my lowest effort of proving. And you know, it makes me think of my dad. He used to always just say, never prove yourself. And I didn't really get it until recently. And that included him.
Yeah.
He was most proud of me when I was just like, you know, picking my nose and 10 years old on the couch. I didn't need to show him that I could sing this great thing, or that I had accumulated and run a business. Like, none of those moments that I thought would be these huge victories, when the energy of proving was there, there was a flatness.
Yeah.
So it's a fun thing to play with. Like, maybe everywhere that we look to be liked is where we're actually aware of an amazing contribution we can have for each other, and we could just change that. We could alter that. We could create something new.
Yeah. Yeah, I really see that too. This really space of allowance. I mean, you know, we already mentioned it a little bit, but that thing of like, you know, whatever you choose, hi, right? Like, I'm here. And, you know, and then there may be there may be a point where, for me, what you're choosing doesn't work for me. And it's like, okay, well, you know, thank you, and I'm choosing something else. But there's no trauma and drama about, you should choose something different, you should be something different, you know, so that we can make it work. It's okay to say, you know, thank you so much for being you, enjoy. And, you know, and also, you don't have to choose together. That's okay. It also doesn't mean that being kind to you means that you have to cut yourself off from everyone too. I mean, I see that sometimes too, where people, you know, they sometimes can go into conclusion about, well, if I'm going to be kind to me, then I'm going to get rid of these people. I'm going to, you know, not be involved in this stuff anymore. I'm going to, you know, cut everything out. And so I can be kind to me. And yet, you know, I wonder sometimes, does that actually go into another conclusion?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just
yeah. Brief hold
funny.
music. Yeah, but does that actually, you know, when we go into conclusion, you're talking about these 10 seconds, every 10 seconds, every 10 seconds. What may be the kindest choice for me in this 10 seconds may be different in 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 3 minutes, an hour tomorrow. Yeah. And are we willing to actually you're talking about chaos, and like, you know, for how many people does that kind of feel like chaos? Like, oh, I don't know. I mean, that just doesn't seem, you know, that just seems flaky or flighty, or, you know, ungrounded or uncommitted or wishy-washy or undecided. And what if it's actually that you can be fully committed every 10 seconds, you know?
Yeah. And like, I mean, I ask this of my body and my being all the time, but like, you know, it's a willingness to screw up. It's a willingness to fail and say something stupid, or you know, just once you drop the effort to prove anything,
put yourself out there, and
get,
even if it's a, you know, a lead balloon, like, okay, cool, what else? Allowance for you
and
too.
just keep playing. Yeah, like, and there's an image that I play with a lot too, where I can be very in demand of my presence and my conscious development as an adult, especially when I'm influencing teenagers. Like, I can goof off and laugh and feel like a teenager with them, but always present of a very solid bigness, so I have their back. So we can be chaos and playfulness and lunatics and say the wrong things, while also being an immense contribution, which is far greater than proving our intelligence or our knowledge.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to be
being the knowledge.
Exactly. Exactly. And being actually what's required when it's required.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times I've seen this so many different times where people gift something, whether it's an act of service or an actual tangible gift or kind words or whatever, you know, and they gift something, and yet it actually has nothing to do with the person that they're gifting it to. And it actually has to do with whatever projections, expectations they have about themselves and the other person. And, so then it's like, you give this gift and the gift doesn't land well. And then the giver is upset, like, I did this for you, or, well, I gave you this, or this was expensive, or whatever. And, and you should like it because that was a kindness. And yet,
Right.
if you, I'm trying to think of, if you give someone, earrings that don't have their ears pierced, or, a new pair of shoes and they don't have feet, like, it's like, like being aware of not just, what you've decided in your world, also being aware of, what's around you, and, what is the reality of the person that you're in connection with, and what can they receive, and what are they asking for, and are you actually taking them into account, as well as yourself, right? It's like sometimes we are all inside here trying to give out what we've decided, and it's like we're splatting attempts of kindness on people or at people, and it doesn't land, just as much as sometimes we're splatting ourselves against the wall trying to be kind for others. Right. And it's not matching. So
well, one of those really and again, like, am I like 30 years late on this, but learning also what a kindness it is. We've been talking about allowance, but really looking at when you receive a gift that's based on their projections of you, or their projections of what they are in relation to you. There's these steps of kindness, and it's been a really fun place to allow myself to receive without any reactions. That's what they're perceiving. And old me would try to jump in and like maybe nudge them toward a better understanding of me.
Right.
Or vice versa.
Right.
I got the gift wrong, and then I felt so humiliated, and I wanted to cultivate more knowing of them. But really, like, anything that's even in the vein of kindness, even if it's really off, we can be the space of receiving, which is real kindness. Like, wow, I'm in total allowance of this projection, and this is actually an amazing awareness. And then you know a little bit more, and you know about what you can create with that person, and you can into where they are, and everything is really for more knowing. But it is up to us to be that space of receiving and allowance, and no expectation of what kindness looks like, or how clarified or rarefied our understandings of each other are, because it's never about that.
And it's, really, it's asking that question, what is actually the gift here, right? And looking and like tapping into, okay, so what is it here, right? This doesn't match what I decided their kindness should look like, right? What is it that I can tap into that they were actually, desiring to contribute to me, right? And, tapping into that, because that is actually the gift. And if you're tapping in and it's like, oh my gosh, this actually is like they're being total jerks, and they're actually, sometimes people do that too. They'll give you something, and it has all this weird stuff attached to it. And so, just being aware, like, oh, okay, so that is going on in their world, and can I even tap into whatever it is under that? Because somewhere in their world, there is something about you that's drawing them to you. There's something there where they are in their own way acknowledging you in some way. And even if you have to go that deep, would you be willing to receive that gift? Find that little thread of contribution, of kindness, and then be the allowance to open more space. And who knows, maybe it would even invite them to something different, although it's not your job to try and make anything happen. It's just, what do we choose? And does that create new possibilities for other people when they see something modeled, even especially if it's something that they've never seen before?
Yeah, and I just want to add, like, with all of what you just said, also the gifts of when people pull away from you.
Yeah.
So like we can talk about actual
Yeah.
reaching out, but also pulling away. And it's always interesting to play with like the gift of when they
Yeah.
have unchosen
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and applying everything you just said to all of those absences that we think are cutting off or separation. But again, the allowance to receive
Exactly.
everything. And if you're in that space of
Yeah.
kindness, there is an awareness of what they require,
Yeah.
what you can be aware of,
Yeah.
and what creates more.
Yeah.
And nothing will trigger all of these projections, expectations,
Yes.
and this weird game we do of faux kindness.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of goes back to that liked thing, right? Of like, if you have someone who's in your life that actually is, you know, even if they're not doing anything particular, sometimes you can perceive the energy of people in your life and it can just be a little uncomfortable. And, you know, and then if they come and they say like, I don't want to see you for X number of months or like whatever, you know, and it's like, oh, and there's that little pang of like, ouch, like, you know, and that thing of like, oh, did I do something wrong? Did whatever. And then actually, when you can expand out, be that space of allowance and just recognize, well, cool, like whatever is going on with them, you know, awesome that they're willing to put that out there, have that kindness for them. And, you know, also how cool to not be entangled in it. So if there's somebody that, right, that doesn't really enjoy or desire your energy in their space, you know, instead of going to the wrongness of, you know, what did I do wrong, or what's wrong with me, or why don't they like me? It's like, oh, great. Like, how awesome is that? Because wouldn't it be wonderful to actually choose the people and the energies that we surround ourselves with so that we can actually be in that space of total ease and joy and, you know, being enthusiastic and having the enthusiasm of life every day when we get up, instead of thinking that, yeah, we have to be nice, we have to have the niceties, and you know, and sometimes it's people that, you know, that you can see all these possibilities and it's like, yeah, but, and, you know, what would it take to be the space to to really, really perceive what's going to create greater as the catalyst for kindness, instead of going to putting ourselves in that personal hell, which is really, you know, the name of the episode today. And it's like, hell bent on kindness, like come hell or high water, I will be kind,
Yeah.
even though it may be creating a personal hell for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've done that so dynamically in my past that I really was so paralyzed in my body and paralyzed with the lack of what I had expected my efforts would
Yeah.
get in turn. And it wasn't coming from like, if I do this, I'll get that. It was just this trained program that if I this kind and I was willing to sacrifice me and be present for X, Y, or Z, that this would pan out and they'd have my back when I needed it. And when I needed it, it was like, hey, why aren't you still holding mine?
Yeah. Right.
And it can be very daunting, because once you start suiting yourself up as a foundation for everybody else's life, two things happen. You're gonna wear out, be basically in a like, I don't even know, paralyzed doesn't cover it for me, but dying,
yeah,
a
it's
dying
like
state.
it's like so bogged down. It's like all I can think about is like an old computer that tries to go on the internet, and all of a sudden, like within a nanosecond, all this stuff from the internet has like tried to jump into the computer, and suddenly the processor is like, and it just like can't do anything.
You can't.
It's like that.
And then all of those lies of kindness that you bought, where if you pull out as their foundation, they're gonna fall apart, and you're gonna feel guilty, and there's another reason to just curl up and die. And this cycle goes on and on. And it's a funny way that we play with kindness. But something you mentioned a minute ago was about the space, and this is a subject that just, you know, doesn't ever tire from me, where it didn't, when you're under everybody else and holding everybody together by understanding them and trying to be kind, you are literally in a contracted solid space, holding their solid points of view together and suggesting more points of view to keep them together. And there is really no space, for your body or for your being, and you become so contracted. This is like shortness of breath, anxiety, all kinds of depression and disease and a million other things that can be created from that. And so the space, like, I didn't know that I was entitled to occupy
all the space,
even my body, let alone a room, let alone an auditorium, or even, dare I say, the planet, and just really allow myself to occupy the space. And that was so much more dynamic as the kindness to others, kindness to me, kindness to bodies, kindness that I had such an instantaneous result. I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but there was magic that would happen when I was willing to occupy the space. The effect that I was looking for would surpass all of my conceivable plans. And it would just suddenly, like, the whole room would change, all the people would shift. The colors would become technicolor. A rainbow will literally, like, cast itself across the sky, and all of those things that we think are impossible and miraculous would happen when I would choose to occupy more space. But I didn't know how to occupy space as long as I was holding other people's realities together as the faux kindness. So the faux kindness I had to be willing to pull away from, and I'm still asking everywhere that I'm still doing that can end now. But just like, it's like coming out of a cave. It's like jumping out of the ocean, coming up to the surface, and you're like, are you kidding me? I could play in this big of a space all this time? And any time earlier in my life, when I would try to hold everyone together, there were this is what drew me to being a musician. I kept asking myself, based on the adrenal attacks and the terror and the utter humiliation of performing, why I would choose such a bizarre career endeavor, because it was like torture. But as soon as I would plunk myself on stage, and even if my voice wasn't 100% ready, and the music would start, and I had no other choice,
no way out,
than to occupy the room. My demand to occupy the space based on pressure and force was the only time I had experienced being bigger than my body, and actually having a space of kindness for me, for the gift of me, for my body. And then I could dynamically touch, caress, hold, soothe, heal thousands of people at a time, rather than ramming my points of view and my supposed advice up somebody else's bum.
Here you go. It sounds great. Bend over.
and you know, it's just it's so fun, because it's so much easier. Kindness is actually so easy, and it's freaking fun.
And it doesn't, and then it's so interesting, like this whole thing of like, how much do we, how much I talked a little bit, or we mentioned before about, kind of using kindness almost as a shield or as a barrier. So people won't know what's actually inside. And and it's like, how much do we actually really do try to make ourselves smaller, right? Exist less, have less places to be judged, less places to get it wrong, right? And just kind of cycle through these little things with that shield of kindness to make sure that, everything looks good on the outside, right? The gilded turd. And yet actually, what if there's no turd in there, right? Like, what if it's actually, what if it's actually like, you take off that cheap gilding, and, the true treasure is under there. And that's what you were talking about. Like, even though there was this, you were telling yourself that you were shy or whatever, and then all of a sudden when you would just explode out and be far greater, that was actually when you were able to really perceive you, is what I'm hearing you say, really perceive the
Yeah.
space of you. And, you know, how much more when we're perceiving the space of ourselves, does that make, you know, what we're being even more attractive to others as well, where they're like, ooh, you know, what's going on over there? And like, I would like to have that, because it's actually, you know, this sense of like, what would it take for me to have that kindness, and for me to have that joy of embodiment, and for me to be the space of me that I am, even if we don't have those words, even if we're not cognitively aware, like that we're
Yeah.
seeking that.
Yeah, like so there's this thing that happens, like when you're willing to occupy the space and make some noise, or just be an energetic blast of you without the shame or the fear that your ego has taken over you, but you're literally being the gift. You're turning up the gift of you so people can actually vibrate to it. You've at the moment that you do that, and for me it took for many years the force, and it required the abuse almost of like, you know, get out there and do it. And now I'm playing with it all the time, and when I'm taking a shower, all the way to anything that I do. But when you're willing to do that, the faux kindness, or the where we confuse it with niceties and pleasantries, yes, that goes away, but what gets turned up that really is like a big deal to me is the reason I was always trying to hold everybody together was from this taproot of true caring, because I don't really have a desire to be here on this planet to just sing. I'm not even interested in being here just to, like, you know, smell and breathe the atmosphere. Like, I'm really here because I have this deep, guttural, infinite caring that there's something I really care about here, and I just want to sing it. I just want to say it, and I just want everybody to know it, and I want the planet to hear me, and I want to just like, this place is awesome. And so when you tap into that true caring, and then you're willing to play as chaos and play with occupying more space, then this dynamic effect and ripple effect, really, and then people start to emulate how they can be the gift and the resonance that they be. And then there's this sound that starts to happen. I mean, in music, you start to hear these beautiful harmonies, but when you're with someone and you're creating harmony and conversation, and then you have more people, or maybe a classroom, or one of the most harmonic evenings of my life was my student recital last spring. I've never seen such harmony in the room between the singers and the parents and the music and the lyrics, and there was so many, getting full body goosebumps. There's just so many different layers of the harmonies of being, because everyone was willing to occupy the space. And when you occupy space, you're not pushing everybody out. It actually creates where they can be the space too. And then there's this true caring that shows up. The true caring that you were really trying to get to, or that I was trying to get to, is instantaneous. I can't get over it, and I'm astonished by it every time that it like blasts me in the face, because I still find myself trying to help someone, or like give them what they think they need. But if you just occupy space and they can occupy space, and then a harmony is created, wow, that's what we get to be, the caring and the kindness we were always looking for since we were little tykes.
I mean, that is such a big piece of it, you know, like, where are we trying to be the kindness that we've decided is required? Where's the superiority in that, deciding for someone else, you know, and what is, when they're asking for something and you actually perceive that what they're asking for is not the kindness, you know, if someone is actually entrained or attuned to self-abuse, they could be asking for things that are actually not a kindness to them. So really being aware of that space that you're talking about. And so I was going to ask you, what are some of the tools that you use? You said before, sometimes you have students who come in who are very linear and sort of afraid of that chaos. And sort of getting into that chaos is really this place of getting into the space. And there's also a question from Drew, which is along the same lines, where he's saying, you know, how do you manage to transcend the container and become the space? How do we just put ourselves out there? So what would you say to Drew and to anyone else who's watching about that?
Oh my gosh, there are so many tools. Hey, Drew. So there's so many tools, but before I even go down that route, the first thing is just to ask the question. What would it take to occupy more space? What would it take to be me at a greater capacity? Because the question in and of itself opens you up to those quantum entanglements, opens you up to even starting to hear those kinds of thoughts and have those neuromuscular ninja powers of like, wait, I actually am entitled to the space. Yeah. I'm actually asking for space. I actually deserve to be here. I'm actually a gift, God damn it, and I don't have to prove it, and I don't have to earn it. I just am because I be. Yeah. So the question is the first thing, and you know, I ask this all the time because I contract all the time, and it's like this funny little blob that gets big and small and big and small, and what else is possible? But there's the question, and then you know, there's so many tools in Access Consciousness that help us tangibly get to this amazing capacity to at least diminish, and the target is to dissolve and destroy and uncreate the judgments we have of ourselves and judgment in general. Yeah. But it's funny because if you ever feel yourself in a container, these are points of views that belong to you and belong to everybody else, and maybe belong to other lifetimes, and belong to cultures and ideas and dogma and a bunch of stuff that we devour out of curiosity but aren't necessarily true. Yeah. So anything that is a container, and you know, interesting point of view, I have this point of view, but any kind of container is a lie. Yeah. Because anything that wants to contain a butterfly is like, I just flipped it off out here.
Still family friendly, folks.
Yeah, and you know, maybe a container works for you, or works for, you know, it's worked in different situations or whatever, not to make it wrong. But if you're feeling contained and you're asking for more space, just by asking, I wonder how much more space you've already occupied. And you know, one of the things that shows up for me is when I'm being just aware of other people and where they are and their containers and their boundaries and barriers. When you start to occupy more space, you become even more aware of that. So that was one of the reasons why we tend to contract and go back. It's like, oh, I shouldn't, like, they don't want to open up more. And you see this little universe of bubbled off, contained people. And so we just sort of like go as the herd goes. You just sort of like become another bubble, and you're just in there hoping for the best. But asking the questions, and then, you know, I don't know what to say next. There's like so many tools coming up. What would you say?
Yeah, well,
you?
You know, two of the things. So a few weeks ago, we had Sylvia Puentes on the show, and she is she uses the Right Voice for You body of work with a lot of the facilitation that she does, and you know, using the voice and being the energy of your voice in the world. And so we talked a little bit about, and you mentioned it even in what you just said, you know, lowering your barriers, really lowering your barriers, even though that can sometimes seem really scary because we think we need the barriers to be safe. But if we can actually lower the barriers, lower those judgments, it actually creates more of that space of allowance and of being, and where things can flow through more easily without affecting us. And then also from that place, then expanding your energy. So, you know, whether, you know, to start your visualizing, you know, some people can visualize light, some people can visualize a bubble, you know, or if you can just perceive the space, you know, perceiving, okay, where's the space of you? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Kind of get a sense of where that is, and then expanding it out in all directions until you're out so far that you really begin to perceive the infinite space available. And knowing you can actually access that at any point, and that it's a choice. And, you know, I've been to a few of the different Right Voice for You facilitator trainings, and, you know, or actually, it's actually in the masterclass. When you go to the masterclass, one of the things that we did was basically walk across the stage or go up and sing something. And the thing is, you had to literally just go, you were invited to go up with no story and just do it, right? Nike it, just do it. And even with that little bit of direction, it was pretty interesting to see the number of people that wanted to go up there and pretend they weren't saying something first. But, you know, it's, you know, how many times have we seen this? Oh, you know, I don't know the words to this. Oh, you know, this isn't going to be good. I have a cold. Oh, you know,
Right.
I was up late last night, so my voice is scratchy, right? There has to be this whole story before we can just choose it. And so the exercise is like, no, you just go up and you just choose it. And that's available. Oh, and that's the point. Is it's like you can actually just choose to be it. It's just
you choose to be it, and the perfectionism and the fear to fail, the fear to screw up. I mean, the world talks about this in so many different avenues, but it really comes down to this demand.
Yeah.
Like, am I willing to completely crash?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's not a big
and am I willing to completely fly? Like, am I willing to be so much more amazing than I ever allowed myself to perceive? I mean, both of them, you know, am I really willing to be the penultimate? Am I willing to be the worst? Am I willing to be everything in between? And when we're willing to be any and all of it, we can actually begin to show up with what's fun and what we choose, and play to see even what that is, because sometimes we think we just need to know it so we can just be it right away, instead of allowing ourselves the play and the joy of doing, you know, making one choice and being like, oh, well, that was fun, but that's not for me. Or, oh, that was not fun and not for me. Or, oh, that was ridiculous. And, you know, maybe I'll play with it, but just in a different way or in a different time or place. And, you know, just that thing of like, if you just can continuously choose forward and choose forward and choose forward, instead of thinking that you have to have it all set and ready before the curtain opens. I mean, there's a time and a place for that. But even, I mean, Desiree, even when even when the curtains go up, just because you did it, you know, precisely one way the night before in dress, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that when you get there and the energy of the room and the people there and the energy of the lights and, you know, the energy of the day and like whatever it is, that's going to create something totally different.
Well, this barometer that we put ourselves in between, and it's like failure's here and ultimate success is here, which both are ultimately lies, but let's just say that those were actually true standards.
And the same for everyone.
And there's so many judgments about both. If you really succeed, you know, that's for me, like, talk about running from success, like, very dynamically many times, because I thought that was like an offense to actually be the gift that I am, or I shouldn't be that, I should just be just right, this modulated something that's kind of great and kind of not, and therefore you keep shrinking down to this very rigid container, this very little petrified bullet of what you think the world allows you to be, out of so much fear of those judgments of failure or success. So if we could destroy and uncreate all the projections, expectations, considerations, and beliefs about failure and about success, and if everything really was an infinite playground of capacities, and you know, I've been playing a lot with my students for years about the capacity of error. Like, we think things are errors, we think they're flops. What if those are actually these tremendous moments of vulnerability and tremendous gifts of artistry and sound and whatever, as exciting as those victorious soaring high notes that, you know, we all look for in our careers and our endeavors. But it's just this infinite playground. And so, like, it's so funny how oftentimes you're either leaning toward not really failing and not really succeeding. And what kind of kindness is that to anyone or anything?
And,
I mean, that's hell bent.
Yeah, it's hell bent. And because, you know, you know what they say about the road to hell, right? What it's, you know, it's created by all good intentions, right? It's like, oh, but I'm, you know, I need to be successful. I have to do this. I have to do that. And the thing is, like, what if the true kindness, I mean, this is something that I'm constantly looking at with my life, you know, so aware of so many different people's constructs for what success is, you know, and when we are so aware, right? It's like if I walk down the street, I have the sense that I have to be a success by, by being a good mother. I have to be a success by writing a book. I have to be a success by, I should really perform something on Broadway before I die. I should be a success by having $50 million in my bank account. I should be a success by, starting a business that's thriving, or be a success by starting a charity that saves, the planet. Like, whatever these things are, I can pick up all these things. And yet, what if kindness to ourselves is being that success that we are every day, which is based on the whispers of what is true for us and what it is that we know actually creates greater in our lives and in the, and in the world, based on our energy. And it may show up as something really huge, and it may show up as, moving the salamander out of the road. I mean, it really, who gets to say what it is, and would we be willing to practice that kindness for ourselves and for what it can create in the world by listening to the whispers, listening to what we know, even if it doesn't show up the way we think it will, and even if it doesn't seem like some grand notion. And if a grand notion would be fun, would we be willing to be the kindness to go through the blocks and the sticky points and the scary bits and the fear to create it, if we know that that's actually a true creation that is calling?
Yeah, there's like I love so many of the things you just said. Thank you for that. It's like we do have these funny like checklists of the things that we have to do to make this life worth it. And it was just in the last like month for me that I was acknowledging, and I thought this was just, first of all, I just never really acknowledged it. I didn't notice that I had ever done it. Then when I started to look at it, I thought, it's not a big deal, like whatever. And then I realized, like, oh my God, this is the key to my thriving, and I'm going to turn it up. And it was that it's these little ordinary moments. It's these little ordinary, it's not those check marks. It's this running stream of ordinary moments that you can infuse with being a blast. Being a blast with you and for you, and it doesn't have to make sense to anyone. So just this morning when I was driving, I've always loved driving and blasting music, and there's nobody in the car, so they're not going to judge me for the music that
If anyone could hear me singing in the car, I would definitely have some signed contracts for performances. I promise you that.
Right?
And in the shower. If only people could just hear me in the shower.
And these are some of like the highest moments of my life, are like a 10-minute run to the dry cleaner and back. And yes, I listened to Justin Bieber Baby today.
Yeah, I love it.
And I loved it. And it just made me so happy. And I actually had this thought. It was very much like being in nature where, oh my God, I don't have to justify this to anybody. This is like so much fun, and nobody has to find out about it, even though I'm sharing it right now. Nobody has to find out about it. Nobody has to see it. This is having a blast. I'm having a freaking blast. Like, this is, I mean, it's as fun as like anything I've experienced.
For no reason.
For no reason.
And for all the joy, right? It's like, how much joy are you willing to receive in, with, and through your body? And what can we choose that maybe we haven't chosen yet that invites even more of that?
Like just playing with each and everything that you're doing throughout the day. Have you ensured a certain, little pocket full of joy for you? That would be starting with kindness for you, and that will exponentialize into your body and exponentialize into whatever you're doing, no matter how terrifying, mundane, or extraordinary.
So we don't have to prove our value by how well we made it to hell and back with our kindness. We can actually explore what true kindness is for us and actually include ourselves in the energy of that. And it sounds like we're all now. It's like we all now get to choose sort of kindness 2.0. And what would it take for that to be the download across the planet? I wonder, is now the time. So let's all reboot And yeah, what would it take to choose Kindness 2.0 and actually include our operating system in that upgrade? So before we wrap up, we are coming to the hour. If there is anything else that anyone would like to have us see before we wrap up, please do post it now. Desiree, is there anything else while I'm looking through to see if there's anything else in the thread? Is there anything else that you would like to add or address before we wrap up the show?
I just dare you to have a blast with you, and to never have to explain yourself or justify it to anyone. I think there's like something we haven't tapped into, the intimacy you can have with yourself and the amount of kindness you can have with yourself. And I dare you to have a blast with you and with anyone and everyone. But I dare you especially to be kind to you and have a blast and not have to tell anybody about it.
Yeah. What if it was just for you, just for fun, and it didn't have to have a reason, didn't have to be logical, and how much? I mean,
and then,
go ahead.
Like the last thing is just like when you're choosing to do that or be that, I'm really curious what would show up for you in your family life, in your relationships, in your career, in your money. Every energy in this universe loves and feeds on a kind environment, including mine.
Yeah, and if happiness is just a choice, right? Like, what are also all of the little choices that we can be making, right? That can really facilitate choosing happiness, to where choosing happiness is such ease. It's like if we're constantly choosing to nail gun our feet, like, but then at the same time we're trying to choose happiness, like, what else is possible there, right? So, with this conversation too, and now upgrading our operating systems to Kindness 2.0, right? How can we infuse that into all the little choices that we're making in our life? And how much can we craft and create and curate the life we're living? And how much more ease can we have with actually choosing happiness as the dominant energy in our lives, when we are really allowing all of this to contribute to it? Yeah, amen, sister. Preach.
Double dog dare you. I dare you to be happy, and let everybody judge you.
Yes, awesome. I love it. Barriers down and fire away.
Yep.
Cool.
Don't have any. Don't do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, only do it if happiness would be fun, but it probably wouldn't be. I think probably being hell-bent on kindness and suffering and enduring the misery and proving that you can do it is probably going to be way more effective at having a long and prosperous life.
Yeah, go paralysis.
Oh my gosh, it's exhausting. So, Nini, thank you too. Thanks a million for being here with us. Desiree, it has been a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and so much fun to have everyone here that joined us live. Of course, this will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you're watching this in the future, you found us on YouTube, awesome. Please do subscribe to the channel. We'll have tons more content. If you've missed any of the back episodes, we invite you to go back and see what you can find there. You can find Desiree at her website. It's www.desireedumonde.com. The link will be in the show notes in YouTube when that gets uploaded. She is also on Facebook and also has a profile page on the accessconsciousness.com website. So you can find her there for the energy facilitation and classes in that area that she offers. Drew, thank you for coming. I'm glad that we were able to get you on. And also, please do like the Facebook page here, The Art of Creation Show. We love to have you around. And as always, we'll see you next week. Happy choosing, and I wonder what we'll discover next. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.